Talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not, bringing jobs to the underserved both at home and abroad. I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Leila Janah. She is the founder and CEO at Samasource. Welcome, Leila.
It's so great to be here, Tonya. Thanks.
Let's start with when you launched Samasource. What does Samasource do, and why did you decide to found the company?
I founded Samasource 10 years ago. My original mission was to connect low-income people to jobs through the internet. And I was really passionate about doing that in sub-Saharan Africa, where the narrative for so long has been about charity and aid as opposed to giving people work and economic opportunity. So the company was founded on that premise. We started 10 years ago doing basic data entry and other types of simple outsourced work for the tech industry. And about 6 years ago, found a real foothold in the training data space. So we are now one of the leading providers of training data, of complex and high quality training data for the automotive and high tech industries, which means that our data, which now employs over 2,000 people full time in Kenya and Uganda to annotate, our data is fueling the artificial intelligence algorithms behind self-driving cars, facial recognition technology, even disease detection in biotech.
So let's drill down on that. How did you put together the training program? How does it work exactly?
So I really started with I guess a two-sided problem. On the one side, I looked at the problem of such an oversupply of qualified talent in East Africa with no formal jobs to do. We literally see people who finish secondary school, they can speak the Queen's English, and they're forced to break big rocks into smaller rocks in a quarry because the only employment is in the informal economy. So I saw that on the one hand as a big problem. And I also saw this need in the tech industry for flexible labor solutions to problems like tagging massive amounts of image and video data for things like training artificial intelligence algorithms. So I thought, well, what if we could somehow couple this new source of labor with this big challenge in tech and provide a meaningful employment option to low-income people? I started very humbly with local computer labs in Nairobi in Kenya, in the capital, as sort of third-party vendors to do this work for me. And slowly we raised our profile, grew the model, built our own software platform that works to intermediate the work and break down these tasks into microwork, into smaller chunks, and enable us to train and manage a workforce to do this at high quality. And then eventually we raised the money to build our own facilities. And so now we're one of the largest companies in the space in terms of throughput and revenue. And we now employ over 2,000 people. And what's so exciting is that all of our employees come from low-income backgrounds. So we deliberately try to hire people who wouldn't normally get these jobs. We give them training and then help them perform these complex tasks.
Explain the concept of digital micro work. I mean, what is it and who hires for that?
So when we started, we were doing more generalized tasks. So things like, 10 years ago, really high quality OCR software was more expensive. If you wanted to transcribe a PDF text file into, an actual text version of that file, you couldn't just rely on off-the-shelf software because you wouldn't have 100% quality, right? There'd be a lot of defects. And so you needed to hire people to manually do that work. So we were doing that sort of simple transcription work to begin with. 6 years ago, we got hired by Microsoft to do a massive image annotation project to train the Kinect gaming device. So that is to recognize, a couch behind me when I'm dancing, when I'm playing a dance game or a sports game, or recognize hand gestures. And our agents started becoming really familiar with this new type of work in the emerging field then of artificial intelligence. Now AI, as we know, is dominating every industry. And there are lots of ways we can use computer vision algorithms to automate all kinds of routine processes. Samasource agents are now tagging things like, drone and satellite imagery of giant, solar farms where we're detecting defects on solar panels so that an inspector doesn't have to go out and do that manually. The same kind of approach can be used to detect manufacturing defects on an assembly line. The same approach can be used to train self-driving cars. to recognize lane lines and stop signs and other objects. And now we're starting to move into more advanced kinds of tagging. We just launched a 3D feature on our platform. So agents can look at the output of LiDAR sensor data and actually tag objects in that 3D output. So what looks like total gobbledygook, like a bunch of points in a 3D rendering, an agent can say, well, that's a car. And we're now starting to look at sensor fusion, which is looking at the 3D data alongside a two-dimensional video feed so that you can see the object in 3D at the same time that you're seeing it in 2D. That kind of data is extremely valuable for the automotive industry, and it's really important that that be done at a high quality level by trained people. So it's something that we can do much more effectively than, say, the crowd, where you don't know who's going to be doing the data, you don't know if you're getting the same person every day who's actually trained to recognize objects and images, and you don't know if the data is secure. So we tend to operate at the sort of more complex, higher end of the training data industry.
Why Uganda? Why did you start working in such a remote place?
Well, I've been working in Africa since I was 17, and I first started doing volunteer work there, and I was really interested in the problem of global poverty. We still live in a world where, close to 1 billion people lack access to clean drinking water. Over 2 billion people don't have access to basic sanitation. 300,000 women die each year in childbirth. All of these problems are directly caused by poverty. So if we can increase the incomes of those people, well, they can purchase their own sanitation systems, right? They can afford to give birth in a clinic. And so many of the problems we try to tackle through charity are most effectively tackled when we address the root cause of the problem. And I was really interested in doing this in sub-Saharan Africa because for so long that market has really been overlooked, especially in terms of digital work, right? We think, oh, well, people in Africa, well, maybe they'll be growing coffee or selling agricultural commodities. There's such a pool of untapped talent that has never been really given a chance at scale to work in the digital economy. And so if you believe that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not, which is one of our core beliefs, you have to believe that the next big center of explosive growth is in sub-Saharan Africa. And I was also excited because Kenya and Uganda are, for so long they've been disconnected from the digital economy because they only recently got fiber optic capacity. So the fact that now the internet is much cheaper and more widely available means that all of these young people who were excluded can finally, work in the digital economy and earn really high wages. And then lastly, I just thought there was such a huge pool of talent. Hundreds of thousands of young people graduating from high school each year, really high birth rates. So a lot of the population is young, and extremely high unemployment rates among young people. So we tend to hire people in their 20s, the majority of whom now are women. Over 50% of our agents are women. On average, we can increase their incomes by over 400%. So we move them out of poverty, and then they stay out of poverty even after leaving Sama. And it's just so exciting. This is, I think, a really efficient way to inject capital directly at the bottom of the pyramid without relying on charity or donations, and a model that I think is frankly really paternalistic.
You've got a lot of really big clients in Silicon Valley. You mentioned Microsoft. Who are some of your other clients, and who is a prospect? Who would actually potentially be able to use Samasource?
So I can't mention many of our clients by name because of the sensitive nature of our projects, right? We're working on some of the most confidential AI applications at some of the biggest tech companies, but I can mention Microsoft, Google, Glassdoor, Getty Images, a lot of big tech names. And we also work with some of the leaders in autonomous driving. I think the next big step for us will be in the fields of manufacturing and robotics. And if you think about it, manufacturing isn't really a vertical, it's a horizontal, right? There's applications across everything from aerospace to, hardware and everything in between. So it's kind of mind-boggling to think about the number of applications, which is why we think our business can grow by 500% in the next 5 years or so, just given how much demand there is for these types of services. In the last 4 years, we've grown roughly that amount. So our business has just been just been exploding because there's so much demand. And I think there's not enough people who actually have boots on the ground close to the labor, right? There's been this belief that you can outsource all this work to the crowd and the crowd will magically solve it. But in reality, especially for applications where you need the same agents who are highly qualified, or where you're concerned about security, you don't want someone sitting in a crowded cafe annotating this data in front of everyone and potentially, telling the world what your company is up to. We can solve for that with our approach, with managed services and our facilities in East Africa.
What about your contribution to the gig economy?
So a couple of years ago, we wondered, are there any applications of the Samasource business model to the domestic problem of poverty? And we were really interested in the difference between the two labor markets. Here in the US, in the last decade, 94% of net employment growth has occurred in freelancing, in the independent, in the independent work sector. And yet, we spend $3.5 billion annually, billion with a B, on job training, none of which goes to training people in the gig economy. And a big part of that is that our government, our systems don't really recognize gig work as real work, right? Gig workers are not even protected by basic anti-discrimination laws that apply to all other full-time workers, right? And so there's just such a disparity, and yet it's crazy that in the one sector that's just exploding, that's the one thing we're not training people to do. So not only do we need to reimagine our entire labor policy system, but we also need to reimagine job training and ensure that the most marginalized, vulnerable people in our society are getting training in the sector that's booming. So we launched samaschool.org. Actually, back in 2012, we're the first, and as far as we know, the only nonprofit focused on training low-income Americans in how to earn living wages in the gig economy. So we have a 12-hour boot camp. It's offered for free through a variety of nonprofit partners in San Francisco and New York. We just launched the program online, so you can now take the first 1-hour Gig Essentials course for free on our website. And it's designed to really show you that most Americans have tons of skills that they can use right now to start earning money online, but they just have no idea that this sector even exists, right? Just as one example, we trained a military veteran down in San Jose who's a single mom. She came back from serving the country and, like so many veterans, had a real challenge reintegrating in the workforce. She had no idea that she's now earning over $40 an hour on a website called Field Nation, where you can do outsourced IT support. She didn't even know that kind of a job existed, right? Because it's counterintuitive. If you didn't grow up using the internet to find work or to do work, you may not be aware that these platforms exist, and that with your existing skills, you can start earning like triple or quadruple minimum wage. So I think we have an obligation to ensure that every American knows about this kind of work and can benefit from this radical shift we've seen in the labor market.
Leila Janah, putting people to work all over the world. Thank you so much again for joining us. If somebody wants to connect with you, maybe they want to find out more about your school or your class or the work that you're doing, how can they do that?
The best way is to check out samasource.org, SAMASOURCE.org, or samaschool.org, SAMAschool.org.
Thanks again. Can't recommend this woman enough. If you guys want to connect with me, you can. You can find me right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or go to my website, tonyahall.net. Thanks for watching.